piece to go into graduate school. And
that's just basic wavy guy maintenance, right? Next up, Carvana. Oh boy, Carvana just doesn't seem to understand how the test drive works. They give their customers 7 days, and if they don't like it, they give them their money back. Wait, they take the car back? That's crazy. What if it was driven by like a zookeeper or a mud wrestler or a guy who's on the outs with the missus and he just...
So this lady was affected by Child Protective Services and had to actually use the Innocence Project. And this is related to us finishing up chapter 13 today. Kind of that chart I showed you about how cases go through Child Protective Services, if you have to get placed in foster care, if the investigation shows that the kids were safe, if then a family has to take them as placement, and then they're balancing between these two. So the services that strengthen families and then services that augment family functioning, like if they have to get placed into a foster care. So here's the story. It's only a few minutes.
Child Protective Services investigates more than 90,000 reports of suspected abuse.
No doubt they save lives, but all too often attorneys say children are taken from innocent parents.
Tonight's 7 Action News reporter Kim Russo shows us why it's so important to know your rights if CPS comes calling.
We want to be clear. This story is not against Child Protective Services or police. People who investigate child abuse dedicate their lives to saving kids, and they do just that. But sometimes there are mistakes. It costs one woman everything. She wants to make sure people know what can happen.
There is no motive for compensation. They can never get back what I've lost.
Julie Balmer lost almost everything when she tried to do the right thing. When her sister said she couldn't raise her newborn son, Julie took in baby Philip and offered to adopt him. Then when he was 5 weeks old, he suddenly stopped eating.
When the results came back, they said that there was bleeding in the brain.
A doctor at the hospital diagnosed him with shaken baby syndrome. Julie, in her 20s, with few resources, found herself unable to pay a doctor to review that diagnosis at trial. She was sent to prison for 15 years.
Have you guys heard of shaken baby syndrome? So you'll see a lot of billboards that says never, never shake a baby. And a lot of times it's like a new mother, overwhelmed mother, if the baby doesn't stop crying, and you might get frustrated and by accident can shake them, but it can cause brain bleeding. That's what they accused her of. But the actual brain bleeding was because of a seizure, and the Innocence Project helped find this out for her.
After almost 5 years in prison, the Innocence Project helped exonerate her. An expert found an MRI that proved little Philip suffered a stroke, not trauma. However, by then, Philip had been permanently adopted. She had no right to see him.
To be told that I have no contact with them. You know, that's a cross that I'm gonna bear for the rest of my life. You know, that's a heartache.
Do I think the system works? No.
Child Protective Services defense attorney Sonia Cannon says all parents need to be aware, even the innocent can find themselves under investigation for child abuse.
You better contact an attorney, and you better do it immediately.
It can happen at a hospital with an unexplained illness, or if your child says something that raises a red flag at school.
We don't need a warrant. We're CPS. We don't need a warrant.
This is video posted online by a local mom investigated after her special needs son said at school she didn't feed him, when she says she simply changed his diet. Would you know what to do? She told the CPS worker, and attorney told her to ask what the allegations were before deciding whether to let her in the house.
Who told her that?
The attorney.
Don't call these attorneys because they don't know what they're talking about.
Attorney Cannon says this is a big question parents have, and you can see why. She recommends parents ask the allegations and then, based on that information, decide should they call an attorney or let the worker into their home because the home will help prove the allegations are false. After all, while the investigator does need a warrant to force entry, if you don't let them in, they may ask a judge to remove your children pending an investigation.
We're in the state of Michigan. Do you understand what we do?
Yes, I
We
do.
can't remove children.
Julie says the devastating lesson she learned. Don't let the fact you know you're innocent results in letting your guard down.
So as a person, you put your trust in them, and you don't expect the system to fail. And unfortunately, the system failed, and I just happen to be a victim of that.
Attorneys say if parents do speak to a child abuse investigator, be it a CPS worker or doctor, it is not a bad idea to grab your phone and calmly say you plan to report the interaction so there are no misunderstandings. A lot is at stake. The state has also provided this pamphlet to help educate parents about this process with the goal of protecting children. We'll have a copy of it at our website, wxyz.com. In the newsroom, Kim Russell, 7 Action News.
Thank you, Kim.
So that is one instance where CPS could go wrong and the Innocence Project helped them. There's a few videos on the Innocence Project we had watched earlier. I want to finish up with after the family services. A lot of folks mentioned they wanted to do school social work, and sometimes the school social worker is the first one to call. So we're mandatory reporters in social work. So if we see any signs of abuse, we are supposed to call 241 Kids, and then they investigate. So CPS investigates. We just have to report it because we're mandatory reporters, just like teachers are, social workers are. There's a list of all the mandatory reporters. We have to be sure to do that for our protection of our own license. So school social workers, they provide supportive services for children and families in the context of school settings. And then school social workers also help provide the linkage between the school, home, and the community. Sometimes it's like school lunches, school breakfasts, even like summer food. Some example of the services that a school social worker does is the assessment of children with special education needs. You might help them with an IEP, which is the individualized education plan. Also early developmental screening, and then support for developmental transitions. So IEP can run until you are 21 years of age, actually 21 and 364 days, so almost till you're 22. And social workers are a big part of that. Some other services for adolescents, social workers help with if there is a teen pregnancy and they're looking for a space to have that pregnancy safe or help put up for adoption. Also adolescent suicide. Runaway youth, I mentioned that at Lighthouse Youth Services, we had a homeless shelter for both 13 and 18-year-olds and 18 and 24-year-olds. So one other one that's a big diagnosis at the adolescent age is eating disorders. So you might not be able to diagnose schizophrenia at such a young age, but there's a lot with addiction, alcoholism, eating disorders, and then other things that come up with adolescence. And then one other piece is resiliency in adolescence. And before I go into that, I actually had something on the Innocence Project, and there's quite a bit on the Innocence Project. As you can see, there's some that have the entire story of each person's individual story, and also just a description of the Ohio Innocence Project. So here's the first one that I wanted to show you guys.
Think back to your happiest memories. Your wedding day, graduation. The everyday moments you'll never forget. Some people miss these moments. The day your baby took their first steps.
I was forced to miss watching my son grow. man that he's become. And God willing, I'm hoping that I'm around for my grandson.
The day they were born.
You in a place like that, you know, you didn't do nothing wrong, and you have to give birth with handcuffs and shackles and your feet. It's part of you the day you touched him. I was begging the nurse. I told her I don't want to touch him again.
For so many, these memories are tainted.
The only photo that I had from my childhood was the one being let out of prison. I was robbed of a long life. The tragedy of Mr. Burton's faces 20 years ago, the crime and injustice. I apologize on behalf of the system that failed.
One of their happiest moments is the day they were released from prison. And reunited with their families. But those stolen moments, they'll never get back.
So the Innocence Project has been around for about 30 years. And there's
In March of 1984, I was sitting at my kitchen table where I was
There's
living
a big
with
movement
my
in Ohio.
girlfriend and her 3 children, and we noticed
and specific to the University of Cincinnati. So this weekend we did a visit to the social work program that's offered at the University of Cincinnati. We kind of have a connection with them, with Central State being so close to UC. There's about 5 MSWs around here, including Wright State, Miami University, Northern Kentucky University, even Xavier University just started one, and now UC. But at UC, you can get a law degree, and some social workers are combining both social work and law to do work on this Innocent Project. So this explains it a bit better. So let me start at the beginning. Any questions about the Innocence Project? Has anybody heard of it before? I know it doesn't get a lot of press. So it's kind of a big deal. It's the video I had this morning. Of course, it's not coming up. I'll look in my history after this. It kind of goes back to the right to due process of law. It's your Fourth Amendment rights where you're offered and able to defend yourself in court and have adequate representation. Sometimes you don't have great representation. And luckily, these men who started this 29 years ago truly believed in the freedom, peace, and are putting it to practice. So I'll start this one here.
I served 23 years for a wrongful conviction. I did 29 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. I spent 39 years of my life in prison for a crime I didn't commit.
Well, a Cleveland man will soon be free from prison 39 years after he was falsely accused of murder.
I can endure the beatings, the bites, the stabbings, but the loneliness and the not knowing. And we got so many questions, but nobody's answering any of them.
I spent 15 years incarcerated for a crime that I did not commit.
Lorraine Head Start school bus driver accused 20 years ago was back in a courtroom today.
I thought, my God, what am I going to do? How did this happen to me? You feel so in despair. You want to have that hope and you want to have that faith, but you don't know where you're going to get it from.
I served 20 years in prison for crimes I didn't commit.
I didn't do it. I did not do it. I'm not the guy.
You're doing this time in prison. You're trying to scream and holler to yell at people to listen.
I didn't commit this crime, and I'll never say I did.
The sadness, we have your laughter.
My mother is beating and banging on every door. A friend of hers seen an article in a newspaper that said that they're going to open an Innocence Project in Cincinnati.
I just remember thinking, oh my God, somebody is going to help me finally after all these years.
Nearly 39 years since I walked out of that courtroom, headed to death row, that anybody sat down in front of me and talked to me about what had happened.
When the Innocence Project took my case, it was like a ton of weight was just lifted off of me because I knew that these people got people out of prison.
The 59-year-old man who spent 23 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit.
I was mad. I was hurt. I know I didn't commit a crime.
We are their last hope, someone to advocate and believe in them and fight for them when no one else will. I was lucky enough to have a case where Ed got exonerated, and that was just one of the most emotional and craziest times because I don't think anyone thought he was actually ever going to get out because we got roadblocked time and time again. And he stayed hopeful, and I don't know how. So it was just really awesome to see him finally get his voice heard.
The Ohio Innocence Project is the most important thing I've really done in my legal career. It's a hard job. It's not all wins and celebrations. It's a lot of grind work. It's a lot of looking through records.
These kids, they put a lot of effort to get to know you, to get to know your case. They don't hesitate to come up into the prison to see you.
Seeing that person, seeing the conditions they're living in, it's really the first time that it sinks in that somebody's life is really in your hands. We try to help them understand what we're trying to do to help them get out, and as much as we can, we empathize.
So a lot of the volunteers are students and in graduate school for social work or in the law school at University of Cincinnati. So that's kind of how it started way back when.
They tell us, they will say, like, you guys are my chance, you're my hope. I told Ms. Bergeron and the students, I say, I feel comfortable with y'all, and y'all gonna be the ones to get me out. And I told her, I said, I trust you.
There's sort of the saying with lawyers that you shouldn't get too close to your clients, that you should keep them at arm's length. I just totally disagree with that.
Meeting Morgazzi for the first time was he's just an amazing man. The things that he does and the time and the effort that he puts into every case, and then to have him come to you and talk to you.
My first Thanksgiving as a free man was with him and his family. And I'm extremely grateful for that gesture to open up your home to a guy who's been in prison for 39 years.
You have a lot of sleepless nights when things aren't going well in the case and you feel the pain. I learned from Ricky Jackson, and I'm just honestly in awe of him. It's that connection, that emotion that makes you stay up all night and do the briefs night after night, and it comes across in your voice, your demeanor in court, your passion.
Doing legal stuff is like a roller coaster. Get all the work and get all this intense, scrutiny on something, then you just have to let it go, wait for that next stage.
They spend so much time in putting a case together, and to show that you are innocent, they gave me hope for the first time.
When somebody do something with you for years, they become a part of you, they become a part of everything that y'all are doing together. So y'all rejoin.
I was acquitted in 2009.
December 22nd, 2011, the federal court released me, and I was out for Christmas.
It seems like yesterday when I walked out, when I heard that gavel. That's all I wanted to hear. I just wanted to hear that gavel hit, and now my whole life is changed.
What can you say to a kid who just basically helped save your life? How do you thank them?
as an exoneree, the state isn't obligated to do anything for me. I'm exonerated. I'm released from custody. They have no obligations to me. My Innocence Project was there for me all the way. They kept me off the streets. They helped me get my life back again.
They're never not a part of your life. They're always going to be a part of your life, no matter what.
Nancy Smith, for example, after she was out for a little while, she said, I really want to return to the regular world. I just feel like I need to have a normal job again.
I said, do you think you guys could help me go through a dog grooming school? And he was like, well, Nance, I don't know, but I can look into that for you.
We had a donor who was able to send Nancy back to school, buy all her equipment.
I've never looked back. I love this job and I love what I do. I'm grateful every day that OIP gave me the opportunity to be able to further my career.
After I was freed in 2010, I would go down to Cincinnati to the college to talk with the students. One of the students that I befriended was Ellen McGowan. Something just clicked. She had a boyfriend. When they finally decided to get married, surprising enough, they wanted me to be the person that stood in front of them with the rings, and ask them those questions, do you take this man to be your husband? So I remember standing there holding this paper shaking, trying to go over the lines. That was amazing for somebody to take me in, into their family pretty much, because I'm the guy standing in the middle of all the wedding pictures now.
I have been asked to be on the board of the Ohio Innocence Project. Be a part of the future decision-making organization that's in my life. It's just absolutely one of the greatest honors I'll ever have.
Dean is such an amazing human being, and today he's literally one of my best friends. We talk on the phone all the time. We talk about personal things. We help each other through our lives, and we're going to stay connected for our entire lives.
We joined that here tonight. This first one, I still call her up, see how she's doing, her family. Ohio Innocence Project is family. So that's what you do with family.
Whenever someone's getting ready to get out, 5 or 6 of us will meet up, we'll go up to whatever courthouse it is, wherever they're going to be gotten out. I got to be at Ricky Jackson's exoneration. I got to watch a man walk out of prison after 39 years.
It's a fraternity, man, and it's healing for us to be around people that are like us.
Being an exoneree, it feels pretty special being associated with that title. A lot of the exonerees that I know, they really stay true to the image that we've created for one another.
I've looked over the abyss, gotten to the point where I didn't know if I was going to be able to live another day, but I always had that ember inside of me, that truth. I knew who I was. I wasn't going to let this circumstance define me. I wasn't going to be the criminal they labeled me to be.
I think that means you should be able to be going home soon.
That's it?
A moment to process this.
I knew they didn't say a couple of things, but I knew I'd not this. My mother told me, don't never just go.
So it was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful day.
So a lot of social workers and folks that are in law school at the University of Cincinnati do this locally. And this came up this morning when we were going over Child Protective Services cases, because there's a lot of folks that do get wrongly accused. And as you can see the list here, I mean, it goes on and on. This is kind of a bit much, but you would look at evidence, you would dig back in court cases, the files, and I think there's a good, let's see if I can show the whole history. About what you exactly do as an Ohio Innocence Project person. And that's why they offer that dual degree at the University of Cincinnati. And have some folks that are doing this work. I think this one explains it a bit more, but knowing the Constitution, knowing your legal rights, knowing exactly what lawyers and social workers do, and you get some of that training. One of the internships at the University of Cincinnati is in the homicide department, so you connect with a lot of the families. You guys who are going to go all the way through with the social work degree will have an internship up here also. And this is where resiliency will come in, because that one guy mentioned how there's nothing when he was released from prison that the state has to give him. They can say, oh, we messed up, sorry, but you've been locked up for 10, 20, 30, and almost 40 years. They just say, go figure it out. So resiliency is huge. And this is kind of where, as a social worker, we help connect with teaching the social confidence, helping create problem-solving skills, teaching autonomy and the right to self-determination, with adolescents a lot, sense of purpose and future. And they say if an event occurs in adolescence and you are locked up for a period of time, developmentally you stay in adolescence. So it's hard to have that sense of purpose for the future, high expectations and the community support. So before I got into this one, this explains the liberty piece the best. Any of you guys have any questions? Anybody who came in late want to present? Are you presenting today, or you guys all good? Filming your YouTube or already presented? Just to make sure. All right, and we'll get into this one that kind of covers liberty, and it is hundreds of people that. And that's a quote from 200 years ago. So it's better that 100 guilty persons should escape and one innocent person should suffer. And that's why they have the right to due process of law, like you are given that right to have a chance in trial and to have a good lawyer too. Sometimes you don't have a good lawyer, and that's why they're in there in the first place.
My name is Khadijah Dupree. I'm a Daytona Reed who spent 30 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit.
I was locked up for 22 years. Total of 20 years. I was incarcerated for 36 years for a crime that I did commit.
Spent half of my life basically in there from the age of 28. To be it's like 25 years of my life.
I'm 35 years old and I just got exonerated after 16 years of wrongful imprisonment.
I was 16 at the time I was arrested.
I was incarcerated 24 years. I didn't believe that I'd ever get out. I kind of lost faith.
When it comes to prison, you don't ask how you're station. You just have to. You just have to. You have to keep on. Sorry.
I thought that I was going to die in prison, and I'm so happy that I was wrong.
The Innocence Project started in 1992 out of a law clinic at Cardozo Law School.
People never considered prior to our work just how frequently innocent people can be wrongly convicted. Barry and I were both working as public defenders in the South Bronx, New York City, and a colleague of ours, after we left, had been involved in a robbery case, a rape case, where his client had more than a dozen alibi witnesses saying that he was at a Bible study meeting.
Despite the 17 alibi witnesses, Marion had been picked out in a photo array by the people armed in this crime. And that was enough, even though he had 17 eyewitnesses.
Barry and Peter had heard of a new and more accurate technique of testing biological material, DNA.
There's nobody ever done DNA testing here in a criminal case. And we tried to do DNA testing, but the rape could have been destroyed. And we did other testing, which eventually proved that that man was innocent. But it got us involved with DNA, and we said, wow, there's extraordinary potential here. All these cases where people were tried before they had DNA, maybe we could test the hypothesis of innocence and prove that many people were in fact innocent.
I have to say that at that time, the idea that there were innocent people being arrested and prosecuted and sentenced to jail was really not commonly held. Quite the contrary. Most people in the criminal legal system thought it was a crazy idea, a radical idea. So I first had the privilege of working with the Innocence Project when I joined the Federal Defender's Office in Philadelphia. I was in their capital habeas corpus unit, which meant that I was representing people who were sentenced to death in Pennsylvania. Nick Yaris was actually the very first case I handled, and it turned out that Nick, from the very first time I met him, from the very first time anyone at our office met him, was adamant and unrelenting in his view and his assertion that he was not only innocent of the crime for which he had been convicted and condemned to death, but that he wanted DNA testing and was really just demanding DNA testing. And so the first phone call I made was the Innocence Project. And the Innocence Project worked with me for the entire 7 years that I represented Nick on the DNA. They guided every turn. And because of that instruction, Nick became the first death sentence prisoner in Pennsylvania to be exonerated by DNA evidence. Had they not stepped in and provided us the expert guidance and advice that they did, it is entirely possible that Nick Yaris could have been executed, notwithstanding the fact that he was absolutely and unquestionably innocent.
So that's a lot. 23 people on death row, and you're completely innocent, and you still could be executed. You know what I mean? It makes one think how many executions have gone on where there was innocence to begin with. So as a social worker or an attorney working on this project, digging into the research and the data of what they have, you're definitely saving people's lives.
Nobody wants to admit they put someone in prison falsely. No prosecutor, no police investigator, no judge. So it's vitally important that some independent body be monitoring what the judicial system does. The Innocence Project has exposed reliability problems with evidence such as bite marks, ballistics, blood splatter, and even some fingerprints and eyewitness identification that still result in convicting people regardless of the method's reliability.
One of the most important things that the Innocence Project has done is shine a light on the very real and prevalent problem of junk science in courtrooms. Many of us from a young age have been conditioned to believe that if somebody with scientific credentials comes into a courtroom and testifies as an expert, then what they're telling us must surely be reliable. Things like hair analysis, fingerprint analysis, even bite mark analysis. What we've learned in large measure through the work of the Innocence Project is how many of these techniques are pure junk science.
This lack of standards for evidence had devastating consequences for Marvin Anderson.
It was my first time I've been incarcerated, locked up for anything.
At the age of 18, Anderson was convicted of rape based on faulty eyewitness testimony. The victim had on a set of mugshots, all photos in black and white, with the exception of Marvin's, which was in color.
Marvin Anderson was falsely accused of rape in Virginia. He served 15 years before he was ultimately exonerated by the Innocence Project using DNA evidence.
When my case happened, all they saw was that, black man raped white woman, sentenced to 210 years in prison. That's all they knew about. But when the day I was in front of it, the news video was there, but it was a chance for me to prove to society once again that I was telling the truth from the very beginning, that I did not commit a crime. So it's very joyful for not only for me, but for my mother and my family and all the people that have supported me and stood behind me during my time I was incarcerated.
It's amazing what he's managed to do with his life after this horrific tragedy that I think would destroy most people. He's actually following his childhood dream, not only to be a firefighter, he's actually the chief of the fire department in the town where he lives in Virginia, and he's a member of the board of the Innocence Project. To be able to leave the bitterness and resentment that he must surely feel behind and turn and make his life something that he had dreamed of is inspiring, and it hopefully encourages the rest of us to realize that we must not rest until everybody who has been falsely convicted has been identified, exonerated, and released from prison.
The Innocence Project has helped more than 230 wrongly convicted people secure their freedom.
I spent about 25 years in prison for a murder I didn't commit. And the Innocence Project gave me my freedom. It gave me my life back. I was an average guy, making average money in an average job in an average neighborhood. I lived in the suburbs. I didn't have any criminal record. The worst thing I'd ever done was a speeding ticket. And so if it could happen to me, there's no reason it could happen to you. That's why this project is important.
During the prosecution, prosecutors withheld a number of pieces of what would have been exculpatory evidence. They literally hid evidence that would have exculpated Michael Morton from this crime that he never committed.
After many years of being denied access to evidence or an opportunity to do the DNA test, we eventually were able to demonstrate that Michael was wrongly convicted of killing his wife. That was an example of prosecutorial misconduct. Because if the prosecutor, Ken Anderson in that case, had revealed exculpatory evidence that was in his file, Michael Morton never would have been convicted.
After he was exonerated, Michael worked with the Innocence Project to make policy changes that would prevent what happened to him from happening to others.
Michael was able to work with a right-left coalition in Texas, and we passed the Michael Morton Act, which revolutionized the whole criminal justice system in the state.
The Innocence Project pushes hard not only to exonerate innocent people, pushes hard in order to ensure that the people responsible for those tragedies receive an appropriate level of accountability.
You know, when we talked to Milton Friedman originally about creating the Friedman Prize, we talked about what kind of person would get it. Could be a great scholar, could be a political leader, could be specifically the man who stood in front of the tank at Tiananmen Square.
Have you guys ever seen this Tiananmen Square issue that came up? So China's well known for kind of communist rule and challenging laws. And when they were taking over, it was sometime in the 80s, when the tanks were coming in and taking over, one gentleman stood in front of them. It's become the famous picture to stand up against the oppressors in that sense. So it's about 30 years old of a photo.
The Innocence Project takes on individual clients who have wrongly been punished by the power of the state. So it's kind of like the man standing in front of the tank, trying to defy the system that is very difficult to turn around once it's made its decision.
As a liberty lover, what could be worse than someone's freedom being taken away, for them to be locked up unjustly? And when I think of the Innocence Project, what could be better than restoring those lives? I think there's a wonderful symmetry between people we honored with previous freedom prizes, people who are risking their lives to fight for liberty, and honoring the Innocence Project, who restores lives, gives people back their life, their liberty.
Milton Friedman's concern for liberty applies just as much to the United States as it does to the rest of the world. Notions of civil liberties and civil rights and freedom know no national borders. We started with one project here in New York City. As of now, we have 55 projects in the National Innocence Network throughout the United States, and we have more than 24 projects throughout the world. So the problems of wrongful conviction, the failure of people to follow the rule of law are international problems, not localized to any particular form of government or any particular country.
Freedom is not a state. Freedom is an act. And to have allies like Cato, who are dedicated to protecting freedom, to making sure that people get fair trials, that we have good science, these are extraordinarily important goals.
What does freedom mean to me? A lot.
Freedom means everything. Without freedom, you've got nothing.
Freedom is the totality of life. It's the sum of everything good.
Freedom to me is one, and like I said, it's a new life. It's like being is like given the chance to live a life I have been denied. Enjoy life and go when I want to, not when I want to. You know, walk down the street, go to the store, do the same view.
I can go to the grocery store, I can pay my bills, I can drive a car, I can take a bath.
I love just being free, not under somebody's control.
What the Innocence Project has done is it has underscored the importance of reviving the founder's vision of a fair and just criminal justice system, a system that actually earns the name justice.
30 years from now, when we are looking back on the impact of the Innocence Project, we're going to see, because of the work of the Innocence Project, the American criminal justice system is truly a criminal justice system and not just a criminal legal system.
So Milton Friedman was one of the big pursuers of liberty, like following the Constitution, the order of law, and they've helped, get a lot of people off for crimes that they did not commit. And this is at the University of Cincinnati, so they even, they have their webpage and ability to fundraise and whatnot. But if you do go to graduate school at UC, getting involved is something that's good and helpful. So next week, you guys go on Thanksgiving break. Anybody who's going the farthest away? Who's going to drive the most? Where to?
Connecticut.
Oh yeah. Go to a UConn basketball game. How many?
What?
Go to a UConn basketball game.
Yeah, I've been on them before. I don't go to a lot of them.
Isn't it the women's team that's like swept for 20 years in a row? How many hours is it?
10.
Okay. Anybody else going 5 hours or 3 hours?
I'll
go see.
Okay. Minnesota or
Chicago.
Chicago? Where's the 6?
Muskegon.
Okay. Anybody else? Any favorite dish? The sides or the turkey? I don't eat turkey as I'm a vegetarian. There's supposed to be a turkey shortage, so I'd be interested to see if there's a. I know it sounds insane, but for real, this supply chain thing has gotten weird. So you have your final. It's in here. You can start. There's 10 days over Thanksgiving break, so you can have that complete. We'll only have a week of classes when you come back. And I tried to make this and get this up early for you guys. It's self-assessment, so considering what you want to do with your life, thinking about everything in life. Some of the questions are specific to social work, and if you need to change that to whatever your major is, that's okay. If you're not a social work major, like these, just answer it about as a professional. But just getting you ready for, I know it seems like it's forever away, but in 3 years and probably like 4 months, you guys will be like graduate. You have the opportunity to graduate and like begin adulting if you want, or go to graduate school or do some of those things that are, big deals. And I remember when I was a freshman, that was the last thing on my mind, but preparing yourself for that so you are ready when it happens is kind of the idea here. So this is up for you. You can start it now. You can wait till Thanksgiving. You can wait until the 11th hour, but I just wanted you to have it early so it doesn't interfere with your other exams. It will probably be December 4th until December 14th, I think. So we're good. You can go. I see you holding the bag. That's all I got. That's okay. I know how it is. You got to get out there. Like, come on, let's go. Have a good middle of the week. Email if you have any questions or call or sign in. Hi. What's that? Okay. You want to watch it here? Oh, okay, cool. What's it called? What kind of